The Texans could not find a way to lose to the Colts at home. We're going to talk about all that and more on this edition of The Bullpen.
To throw the punches away. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Touchdown for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to The Bullpen. I am James Roy, and as always with me is Tom Chevria. Tom, how are you doing today?
I don't feel the Texans tried to lose this football game. I know you don't feel that they tried to win the football game. Looking forward to talking about it. There's a lot of people that are in your camp. Trust me, I've seen them on social media. I've seen them in some post-game stuff. Let's get into it.
Let's do it. This is a classic bullpen episode. It feels like it's the story of the season. James is frustrated that the Texans didn't do all they could to win. Tom is happy to be 6-2. Let's get into it. Let's do it. Before we start, I got this new hat on. Got to shout out the Fitted Dad on Instagram. This is a custom drop. I'm pretty sure he's out of these by now. I'm not sure. But this is the first hat I bought with the secondary H logo on it. Really like it. It's really cool. It does have a pink underbrim, which I didn't notice when I ordered it, but it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so why not, you know? And then also, if you are looking for a Texans podcast, you're here. This is it. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and let us know what you think so that you can get the best Texans content available in the entire nation, in my opinion. And maybe other people's. We'll see. I'll have to check in with my mom and my wife and see how they feel about it. But let's get into it. Tom, this Texans offense looked better than last week. I think that I expected more from it, and that it may be why I let myself down. But let's start with the hottest topic, which is Kenyon Green, benched in the middle of the game. Jarrett Patterson comes in and gives signs of life to this offense from the left guard position, and then immediately gets a concussion. Kenyon Green is back, and though some people might not agree, the second half went significantly better than his start to the game. What do you make of the Kenyon Green situation? Do you expect to see any changes in the coming weeks? And yeah, just what are your general thoughts on that?
Kenyon Green is not very good at football right now. He's just not. I feel like I've tried to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. We're talking about a younger guy who was out an entire season, really is trying to find his way. It's just not happening. Now, I will say this, where the fan base, James, other people I've talked to, want to point the finger immediately at Kenyon Green, and you can. He is low-hanging fruit, very easy to target. He is making mistakes left and right. I do not feel he's the only issue. I do not feel this offensive line is doing anyone any favors. There were plays that could have been made to lessen the blow, to make Kenyon Green not look so bad. I think the way that this offense is being called, Bobby Slowick needs to be called into question. We are not giving CJ chances. He's got formations where you've got two tight ends trying to block defensive ends, and it's just and it's not a thing. So you want to pick on Kenyon Green, you can. It's there. But they're getting beat left and right on this offensive line. And you saw it in the game. If you caught it, CJ and Bobby Slowick were not necessarily on the same page on a couple of issues. And I'm starting to think this is more about Bobby and less about the other parts.
I'll ask you this afterwards. I had a question come from that. But to speak to that, I couldn't agree more. I think John Crumpler captured it in his commentary, which is that he's ready to skip the let's bench Kenyon Green discussion and go straight into the let's talk about this offense, maybe just coaching staff in general. I mean, understanding the way that leadership works, like D'Amico doesn't call the offensive side, but if he doesn't agree with what Bobby Slowick's doing or sees issue with it, it's his job to step in and confront him on that, and that's not happened. I also thought the decision to put Kenyon Green back out there after benching him when Jarrett Patterson got injured, when you had Kendrick Green available, was a questionable decision from the coaching staff. And it, like, the three plays immediately following Kenyon Green re-entering the game all were bad as a result of Kenyon Green's inability to do his job on his part of the offensive line. To speak to your point, I do agree with you that this is not just a Kenyon Green issue. And I've spoken to this a lot throughout our time, right? Which is that you have to dive down and find the root cause of this. Kenyon Green is a symptom of a deeper problem with this Texans offense, which you could say is the offensive line, you could say is Bobby Slowick, you could say is a number of things. And it's just that the Texans need to get down to that. And right now, I agree with I'm looking past Bobby Slowick. I'm looking at D'Amico, and I want to know, hey, D'Amico, what are you doing about this? Because you're the head coach. You're in charge of the whole team, and the offense is very evidently struggling. I agree with D'Amico's philosophy so far, which is let Bobby handle it. Let him do his thing. But the Texans are sitting at 6-2 with several very unimpressive offensive performances that, and in one case, which was against the Packers, literally cost them the game, was the offense's inability to perform. And so with that, you have to, as D'Amico, start having those conversations with Bobby, and I trust that he probably is, especially after the way today went. I think that it's the right move on D'Amico's part. Like, you look at those locker room videos, you look at the way he handles himself. He talks like you do, Tom. I think you have the right attitude towards this, which is like, a win is a win. We grinded it out. We're a team that wins close games, and that's the right attitude. But to not see that problem and be addressing it on some level at this point in the season would be to be complacent and to be setting yourself up for failure in the future. So I definitely think it's something that needs to be looked at. And it leads into my next question, which is that, do you think that Bobby Slowick's job security this season is starting to become something that could be a very real issue? Or do you foresee the Texans just carrying on like this, and as long as the wins happen, it's all good, and then waiting until the losses happen?
So let me ask you this, and I don't always answer a question with a question, but I feel like this is fair. You want to call into question D'Amico Ryans. I've heard that today too. Are y'all prepared to fire second-year coach D'Amico Ryans because a 6-2 team doesn't look sexy enough to you? Doesn't pass the eye test? Because as bad as these games are for all these people, there are so many other instances. The Baltimore Ravens lost to a Cleveland Browns team that was 1-6 today with a backup quarterback. They have Super Bowl aspirations too. Are they firing their head coach today, who's had twice as long to do this? I'll give you this. The expectations are high. They should be. There's a lot of talent. They've done a great job assembling this roster. The fans are jacked up to 1,000. I get that. However, it's a second-year head coach and a second-year offensive coordinator and a second-year quarterback. And these are things, as much as you want to talk about Bobby, and I want to talk about Bobby, and as much as you want to talk about D'Amico, and we could, CJ Stroud didn't have his best game today. He missed throws.
We'll talk about that.
He missed throws. I don't think anybody wants to touch CJ. He's beyond reproach. And for me, it's like, look, there are tons of issues right now with this ball club. Some of them are correctable. Some of them, maybe it's an offseason thing. But they're still winning football games. And we can be upset about the little things all we want. If they're right in November and December, no one's going to care about what happened in October and September.
I agree with you. I'll spin it to you this way, right? Let's say you're working at an office job and you're in charge of like two different divisions, and one of them is not doing the best, but the other one is doing enough that your branch that you're in charge of is performing at the level it needs to, and you're winning at what you need to do as a standard employee at this company. And so no questions are being raised by the upper management, right? Upper management's not interested in improving the process that you're not doing well at, because it's not to the detriment of the entire company, right? Then one day, all of a sudden, everything goes to crap. The economy takes a turn, and now this company is looking at every possible thing that could save them money, and they see that one thing of yours, and they're like, we're not doing well, and that one thing is something that has been an issue for a while. Why did we never address it, right? Instead of being that company, you could be that company A, you could be company B, and you could come down and say, hey, we like what you're doing, D'Amico. This is really good. We love that the overall product is great, but is there any way we could be better at offense just to kind of set ourselves up better for the future? That way we don't have to ask you this question at a time where your job will be on the line. Like, I'm not saying to look at D'Amico and say, hey, your job is on the line, fix the offense. What I'm saying is looking at D'Amico and saying, hey, love what you're doing. Love it. We're 6-2. It's a great time. Sorry, excuse me. It's a great time to be a Texans football fan. But what's up with the offense? Is there anything? What are we doing to work towards bettering that right now? That's all I want is a plan of action. If I'm Cal, right, as a fan, I'll never know that. They'll never come to me and say, "Here's our plan for getting better at this." But to see in consecutive weeks the offense fail to do anything to adjust, and two very different outcomes: a close win and a close loss. Sure, I love winning close games. That's great. The fact that the Texans have a 5-1 record in close games, give it to me. That's great. Awesome. Amazing. But at the end of the day, if you're not asking questions on how to improve that process, then when it comes down to it, you could be like the 49ers. The 49ers are a prime example of that. You're not asking questions about that process, and then you get into the Super Bowl and you go up by a lot, and then it all falls apart and you lose that game. And then what are you left with? The 49ers are in such turmoil right now. They're a team that's just, there's people asking for Kyle Shanahan's job right now because they always reach that high level and then it falls apart when it matters. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking forward to when it matters for the Texans. Are they going to look like this? Because if they do, they're going to lose. And if they win, sure, that's great. I would love for this team to suck the way it has on offense for an entire season and then make it all the way to the Super Bowl, and for CJ to throw for 70 yards and 3 interceptions, and then for the Texans to go, but Joe Mixon ran for 150 yards and the defense held it down and the Texans won the Super Bowl. I would be okay with that, right? That is 100% fine. But at this stage in the season, looking to where the Texans could be and seeing how they perform, that's not how it usually goes at the big stage when you perform the way they have. So that is my big concern. I'm not calling for D'Amico's job. I'm just saying I'm wondering out loud. I'm thinking out loud. Shout out Ed Sheeran. Is D'Amico addressing this, and how is he addressing it behind closed doors? I'm curious, because if D'Amico's interested in long-term employment as a Texans coach, he should probably set himself up for success offensively, whether that involves moving on from Slowick this offseason. I don't think that moving on from Slowick is a thing that happens this season. I think that you start having those conversations and giving chances, and then after this season, if it comes down to it, right, the way I see it going, the Texans get to the point where maybe they finally make it past the divisional round, right? And then in the AFC Championship, the offense just takes a dump. And it's a thing that's happened consistently all season. Then I see D'Amico going in and being like, hey, Bobby, your services are no longer required. We're going to turn to Gerard Johnson, and we're going to see what he can do, or we're going to find the next great offensive coordinator somewhere else. But yeah, I'll get off my soapbox and my rant on that, and I'll let you have a chance to reply to that. I feel like I put a lot out there.
I just don't know what you're seeing in the league that makes you think that the Texans are not doing enough to win football games when they're scoring 23 points a game consistently and winning football games. I get it. You see that Detroit game and you go, the Texans could be scoring 52 points. And you go, well, we need to fire somebody because we're not getting 52 points, even though they have all the weapons. For me, all I care about is that they win the football game. And the one thing that I think D'Amico's doing is he's standing on his defense. He's standing on what he knows how to do. This defense, without its starting linebackers, could be Super Bowl caliber when it's whole, when it's all said and done. It looks very, very good. I think they're still incorporating pieces. Mario Edwards is down. You got D'Amico Autry starting to find his way a little bit. I mean, Devin White they just picked up looked good. Like, this team could be really, really special defensively. And then if the offense does anything more than what they're doing right now, well, then they just handily beat people. The problem that I feel that I see from a lot of people is just like, you're predicting the loss because they're not winning good enough for you, not because they're not winning games. If they were losing these games, total different conversation. The fact that they basically have a 3-game lead in the division, which I don't even think is in question anymore. If we're worried about them being right, we need to worry about them being right in December, Now, if you think they can't fix that because they have a coaching problem or they have a personnel problem, I don't know how many teams at 6-2 moved on from their offensive coordinator. I don't know how many teams at 6-2 just all of a sudden go, we're going to make a change at head coach because we're not winning enough. I think you're going to see potentially something happen in the offseason. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, you need to go trade for a safety or an offensive line or a wide receiver. I think Bobby's going to, or not Bobby, I'm sorry. Nick Caserio is going to operate with, okay, if I get value somewhere, then I'll do something. But I don't think he's going to force a move. A lot of people are talking about Jace Patterson. Well, he got a concussion, and Kenyon Green's going to have to step back into that role. The one thing I'm wondering about Kendrick Green, which everybody, yourself included, is beating the drum for, if he's so good, how come they didn't play him over Jace? Jace isn't a tackle or a guard by trade. Now, Jace played great.
What, Jarrett?
Or
Jarrett Patterson, center/guard. He's played both.
But I'm just saying, I think Kendrick Green's more of a guard than Jared Patterson is. But he was the first guy. So something with Kendrick Green is not right because they would have went to him by now.
I agree with you. I think that there's something weird going on there, and I'm interested to see it. As far as it goes, I have one last thing to say in regards to this conversation. I think it's a timing thing. And the reason that I'm pressing in on this conversation now is that I agree with you. Like you gave comparison to the rest of the league, like the Ravens and stuff. There will be those fluke games that happen. And early on in the season, just about every team is trying to figure out their identity. So even the best teams will look kind of bad against teams that are not worthy opponents, right? But there's a point, and I don't think this is the point because this is the Colts and it's a divisional game, and you know how I feel about divisional games. But due to the way the offense performed today, and with the context of the Green Bay Packers game, it is important to have the discussion because I think the Texans are entering the window, as is the rest of the league, where you expect your contenders to kind of start looking like contenders against teams that are not in their weight class, if you will. And so we'll see it on Thursday against the Jets. I mean, this is a team that didn't look like they were in the Texans weight class last year and came in and came in swinging. And so we'll see how it goes. This Jets team has not looked very good so far this season, and it'll be interesting to see how the Texans play them. But that's what I'm saying is more timing. Like we're entering that window where the Texans need to be at that level, and there will be a lesser margin for error as we move forward. I think you referenced it. December's probably really the point where you really hone in and go, okay, this isn't going to fly. And the Texans have a really tough schedule in December. So we'll really get that tough 10-day stretch down and we'll see what happened. You referenced CJ earlier. Let's get your thoughts out there on that and we'll talk about it. How do you think CJ did today? 285 yards, passing touchdown, 99 rating. Not the worst, but I mean, I know what you're talking about because I watched the game. So let's hear it, Tom. What do you got to say about CJ's performance today?
I think if you want to be critical of other players, and we've been critical of tons of other players, at what point does CJ catch some of this shade that, okay, Dalton Schultz gets for only catching 2 of 4 balls, or Tank Dell being MIA, and you know what I mean? CJ missed some throws. CJ almost threw some picks. CJ got away with some things. I think he held on to the ball too long a couple times. I think he didn't use his feet. There are a lot of things that CJ could do to help this team because he's got the football more than anybody else. And no question, this is our leader, our captain, our guy. I get it. Has all the tools to be one of the greatest quarterbacks when he's done. But if we want to sit here and be critical of all these other guys for what they are, what they're not, there's definitely some stuff that I think CJ could do better to help this football team, and I'm okay with it. But I can't sit by in my mind and sit here and tear down guys on this roster who, yeah, they didn't play their best or whatever, you know. Kate Silver missed a tackle. I think he was in the way on that pitch. And I like Cade Silver, but there are plays where I feel like maybe Cade could be better. So I just feel like with CJ, he's normally above reproach. We don't even touch him. We just he's good. Even when there are times when I think he should get rid of the ball, stuff like that. For me, if you want the team to perform the way you want them to perform, CJ's got to ratchet his game up. And
CJ's the key, yeah, 100%.
And I get that he can't. He's tied a little bit. I don't see him move cover. I don't see him move protections. I don't see him audible much. I think something that was made aware to me during the broadcast, which started me on really a Bobby Slowick train. Like, I'm really starting to hone in on all these other people that have been like after Bobby. I've been really defensive of Bobby for a while. Now I'm starting to see like they're having a hard time getting into the huddle. And that was something they said on the broadcast, and that blew my mind. That means that there is an issue with Bobby Slowick being able to dial up plays, and they can't get them to their people. So he gets to the line, 5 seconds left, not enough time to dissect what's coming, what's going.
He's just got to snap it, just get it going. I see what you're saying. I'm down to have the CJ conversation, and I saw a lot of good dialogue on this on Twitter. One I'd like to reference is Jordan Pun, Texans Thoughts, made a really good point, which is that CJ's pinpoint accuracy has not quite, and I think Lance Zierlein also said this too, it's not quite been the same this whole season, and we're finally at a point where it's worth mentioning. So it's not to say like, oh, CJ's not CJ. This is it. This is over. It's the end. This is a 6-2 team, like Tom said, and like I know is true, even though some people, based on how I talk about it, might not think I know is true. But this team is 6-2, and CJ is not playing his best ball. That's the simple fact of the matter. And so I agree with you, and I think it's lost because like I've done it before. Last week, I said, you say outside of CJ, these are the things that need to happen, and you kind of take the focus off CJ when you do that. And so when we look at what CJ Stroud did this past week, 285 yards, 1 touchdown is not bad. Didn't turn the ball over, but you could tell there was some throws where there was a couple plays where like you saw the guy that was open, like Diggs is cutting across the middle, and you see him like under pressure, obviously. Usually CJ under pressure makes a play where he finds Diggs on an impressive throw. Instead, he tries to lob it to Cade Stover, who's not in his range. There's minor differences between what we had from CJ last year versus what we're getting this year that are leading to maybe a little less, right? And that's not to say we're like CJ is not it. This is like, I don't know. This is a conversation worth having just to say that CJ has some things he needs to dial in this week or in this year. And the way I look at it, I kind of talked about it on Twitter. Like a lot of people said CJ's sophomore slump would be because like other teams would have the tape, right? And little did they know the Texans' offense is really CJ Stroud's worst enemy. People were correcting me and saying offensive line specifically, but like you alluded to, if your offensive coordinator in year 2 is not getting you the plays quickly and giving you the time to dissect, like that's an issue. So there are, and I think that's the biggest reason why CJ doesn't catch a lot of flack, is there are a lot of excuses for why CJ is the way he is. But I got a comment that kind of put it into perspective for me. Someone said this, and it reminded me of how the dialogue went around Davis Mills. And it's sad to say that that's the case. But they said, well, some quarterbacks make the team around them better, and other quarterbacks need the team around them to be better. And I'd like to think that CJ is the kind of quarterback that makes the team around him better. And I think that's shown in spite of the roadblocks that are in his way. But for this team to play at the level that we expect them to with Super Bowl aspirations, the other pieces need to come into place too. So I agree with you that there's a conversation to be had about CJ's accuracy being less so than it has been, but there are other pieces in play to make this an elite team, and I think CJ has some stuff to work on in that regard to make this team an elite team. So that's what I'll leave it at. That's where I'll leave off. It was National Tight Ends Day, and the Texans really leaned into that. There was a lot of targets for the tight ends. Stover and Schultz had a day in a way. How do you feel about the way that do you feel like it's a bounce back game for Schultz, who's had a pretty rough stretch recently?
I wouldn't say all that. I'm not as hypercritical as some people are on Dalton Schultz because I just don't think the target share has been there throughout the season. So every catch he doesn't make is magnified tenfold, even though other guys are getting more targets. So for me, it's like if he would have got 8 to 10 targets, and then we're talking about him dropping like 3 or 4 of them, I could see it. Right now, it's like, okay, you get 4, and if you drop 1, we're beating that 1 up. So for me, I thought that the more that they incorporate Cade Stover and Dalton Schultz into the offense, I think then we can get into the conversation of, yeah, they're not performing or whatever. I thought they've always been able to do just enough. I think Dalton is probably the biggest one for me of all the guys that really don't benefit from CJ being accurate. It seems like every time he misses a throw, it's to Dalton Schultz. Behind him, away from him. I don't know if it's the route tree that they have him run, and that kind of hurts him a little bit. But I don't mind what they're doing. I think we're going to need the tight ends to be more productive with Stephon Diggs potentially being out.
Yeah, and I could have told you that with Nico Collins out, and this is finally the week where they stepped up early when they had to, and then obviously with Stephon Diggs going out, the tight end stepped up in a big way in this game. I liked what they did, and that brings up the next question, which is Stephon Diggs. Non-contact injury, as far as we know, I haven't seen anything that indicates how long he's supposed to be out. How do you view that? So we've had discussions on the trade deadline and what the Texans should address. Is there any reason to believe that through free agency or trades that they would need to bring in another wide receiver if Stephon Diggs misses any time?
I don't think so, and it's only because they are already talking about Nico coming back week 10. So we're talking about 2 games. I'd like to think that between Dalton Schultz, Cade Stover, Xavier Hutchinson, Tank Dell, Robert Woods, there's enough on this team to be able to get back to Nico. Now, if you feel like you need somebody like Stephon Diggs to be opposite of Nico to unlock him, maybe you go out there and make a move for somebody. But Nick Cassera hasn't been the type, to me so far, to reach for anything. So I can't see him doing that in the middle of the season when he definitely didn't do it in the offseason.
Yeah, and there's been that discussion of a left guard, cornerback, safety, now wide receiver. There's a lot of things, and the fans kind of talk that way. The only reason I feel like it could happen is that recently Nick's been on a stretch of like when the fans say, "Oh, Devin White's available," and now Devin White's a Texan, and like there's all these moves being made that feel like they're not obviously not made because the fans want it, but like it's more commonplace than it has been in the past. But I don't see the need to grab a wide receiver. And you shouldn't, if you are a believer that Tank Dell could be wide receiver 1, then you should be thrilled that he gets a chance to prove it. And I believe that with that, right, it's just 1 week because it's just the Jets game, and then Nico would be in line to be designated to return for the Lions game, which would be the next week. So, I don't know. I don't see any need to add there. I've shifted into the camp that I think left guard, a starting interior offensive lineman would be worthwhile to add if Nick can shimmy the deal in the right way. I think one of the ones that's been brought up is Wyatt Teller on the Browns, I believe is his name. I was a huge proponent for, there was another guy, I can't remember his name now, but for adding another left guard over the course of last season in the middle of it when the Texans were going through their real struggles in terms of keeping healthy offensive linemen. But if there was ever a position that could drastically change the landscape that you don't have significant monetary capital locked up in, it's center or left guard. So grabbing a starter at one of those positions, because people are talking about Kenyon, but like you said, there's other people. Titus Howard kind of had a wishy-washy game. Juice Scruggs got blown off the line a few times, and people were blaming it on Kenyon Green when it was really on him. So there's work to be done. This offensive line, and that traces back to my frustrations. One of my bigger frustrations is the lack of ability to adjust when those players are playing like that. And some of it's there's no depth at center. You can't put someone else in there. Juice Scruggs is just going to have to figure it out. But like at left guard, finally putting in Jarrett Patterson just to see him get injured, and then having Kendrick Green, I need to know what's up if you're not going with Kendrick Green when you just benched Kenyon, but that's a discussion for another day. Maybe later. Who knows? Let's talk briefly about the defense before we kind of bring this thing to a close. It showed up. I mean, like you referenced earlier, CJ or D'Amico has kind of decided to lean into his defense's ability to just be there to kind of be the lifeblood of this team. What was your general thoughts on how the defense stepped up in this game overall?
I think they really showed potential to be an elite top 5 defense in the league when Kamari Lassiter is playing the way that we've seen him capable of being able to lock down a side. I think you got Derek Stingley Jr. We know what he is. Jalen Petrie, for the people that were out on Jalen Petrie, I think there's a lot of people that are like, my bad. Where's the apology form? I'll sign it. Eric Murray.
I'll sign it. I'll do it right now. Do it. Bring it to me.
Eric Murray. I know I've been critical of Eric Murray. A lot of people have been critical of Eric Murray.
He really stepped up today.
He looked really good today. Devin White, you spoke to, dude literally was on the street, 3 days ago, showed up, played a ton, was involved. I think Nico Autry got a little bit involved, not to the point that people want to see, obviously, but the point that I made earlier was
baby steps.
This guy's 34. He's probably going to take a couple weeks to get right and get going. The real exciting thing for me is just when you see Will Anderson Jr., potential defensive player of the year, 7.5 sacks, and then Daniil Hunter on the other side, big key free agent acquisition. I mean, they literally had Anthony Richardson tap out in the middle of a game. You never see it.
I can't believe that. Oh my gosh.
Literally
it always
tapped out.
You know how sometimes people say like, you couldn't get that out of me if you tried, like, and that we should know less about each other on the internet? That's just something that I think Colts fans specifically could probably have gone their whole life without knowing. Because, man, that raises so many questions. Already so many. I spoke to it before the game. Someone said, I think that Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor are a top 5 quarterback running back combination in the league. And I'm like, I think that they're not the best quarterback running back combination on the team. And that just emphasized, I couldn't imagine any other worthwhile quarterback saying, well, honestly, I was a little tired. I'm like, okay, dude, well, suck it up. Get in there and play. You're an NFL quarterback. People would die for that opportunity. I can't believe you just I am good.
To be fair, he was running for his life. Like
those
two plays, he probably ran 30 yards in like 30 seconds. So
we got to stop talking about it because I'm going to get more mean the more I talk about it. I'm holding back right now. I really don't want to be too mean about it, but man, good grief. But yeah, I mean, overall, the defense did really well. And like you said, Anthony Richardson was running for his life. There's a reason he decided to call a training timeout, get to the sideline, and maybe take a breath. I was wondering, that was such strange. Anyway, I'm not going to dive back into that. But yeah, Neville Hewitt wasn't quite as WWE this week. He showed up. And Jake Hansen, in his own right, he had a sack, technically. That was one where it looked like Richardson left the backfield, but they gave him a sack, so I'll take it. And then speaking to Devin White was literally on a blitz early in the game, was like a thread away from having a sack on Anthony Richardson. I'm surprised that he couldn't get there, but man, I mean, this is a unit that will. I mean, and we've talked about it, and I've kind of used it as a criticism for D'Amico at some points, but man, he really does believe you just line up and play defense. That's just what he's going to do. And this is one of those weeks where you look and you go, that was the right call. You just line up and you just kind of play defense. Just do it. See what happens. And with Kamari Lassiter back, I think that's the biggest piece that helped out. And I'm also curious to see how Kalen Bullock is doing because I know that he, I don't believe he came back in that game.
No, he did. He did.
He did? Okay. I must have missed that. I mixed that up with Jarrett Patterson when they said that he was out. Those notifications came through at the same time, and I was like trying to get my kid lunch and also watch the game. I lost track of that one. But yeah, I mean, overall, great defensive performance. I don't think there's much more to say about it. I mean, the fact that Jonathan Taylor got over 100 yards is a little frustrating, but yeah, I mean, you pick your battles. That's one where I'm 100% in your camp. That's like a win is a win. I don't care how many yards Jonathan Taylor put up. The Texans won the game, so. That's where I'm at on that. Tom, do you have any final thoughts before we kind of bring this recap, if you will, to a close?
I think when you look at a 3-game lead in your division, there's not a lot of teams that can say that. This is a really impressive thing the Texans are doing. They're taking care of business at NRG where they're 4-0 in the division. Like that's normally priority number one. You do those things and then you win, 50% of the games outside of your division on the road, and you normally have a really good season. We can be hypercritical about this team a lot, and we will. It's what we do. It's what fans do. They seek for perfection, even though it's absolutely unattainable. In the end, these wins are what's going to get you in a position to really get that brass ring and have an opportunity to A, play these games in your building where you're very good, and B, get some time off, get healthy, that sort of thing. So right now the Texans are doing everything they need to do. Take care of the teams you need to take care of, play the other ones tough, and I think we'll be there at the end.
I couldn't agree more, Tom. That was very well stated. A win is a win, as we've been saying. I'm trying to grin through it and say that and just hope that I can believe it at some point. I do to an extent agree with that, but once you start talking about ends justifying the means, you start losing track of what the process is to get to the ends. So I don't know. It's a win, and I'm going to justify this one under my divisional game blanket. I referenced it earlier, and I didn't really talk about it too hard when we previewed this, but I am a firm believer that division games could go either way. It is truly, that kind of stuff, but I just don't remember. I look back to the Texans when they were 5-2 back in 2012, and I feel like they were more convincing in their wins. But I know this team can get there, so that's where I'll leave it at. Happy to get the win. Thanks for listening to the bullpen. I have been James Roy, and my voice has been really raspy. I'm gonna try and work on that. That just came up. And as I said at the beginning of the episode, this is a Texans podcast. If you would like to continue listening to us, you should like, comment, and subscribe. We are the Bullpen, and that's how you can find us. Just search up the Bullpen, a Houston Texans podcast on whatever platform you'd like to find us, and we will pop up. If you'd like to follow the Bullpen on social media, it is at the Bullpen Cast on Instagram and Twitter. I'd recommend Instagram over Twitter. It's a little more active. And Tom is at Third Coast Tom on Twitter and at TCTom1 on Instagram. I am at James Roy NFL and on Twitter, and at N1 Texans fan on Instagram. And the Texans are undefeated in games that I've given away tickets to, which you should put the notifications on Twitter, because the night before this game, I literally I didn't do the whole normal giveaway thing. I just said, hey, first person who hasn't been to a game and that replies. And shout out to Orlando that he managed to make his way to a game. Hope you had fun, man. And yeah, all right, sweet. Thanks for joining us. As always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.